Love is the shield that guards the soul from darkness. It is the divine covering that keeps the human heart from being consumed by bitterness, fear, and anger. When God created man, he wrapped us in his perfect love, not as an optional accessory, but as an essential armor to protect the most vulnerable parts of our being. Love is not just a sweet word or a fleeting emotion. It is a living force, a spiritual defense system designed to guard your mind, your heart, and your spirit. Without that shield, life's arrows will pierce deep, and the wounds will not just hurt. They will fester, they will infect, and they will try to redefine who you are. Love is what keeps the soul tender when the world tries to harden it. It is what whispers hope when everything else screams despair. It is what turns enemies into brothers and strangers into family. Love is the one thing that darkness cannot imitate, because true love comes from God, and every time it is present, darkness is forced to retreat. When you are covered by love, your response to offense changes. The shield of love absorbs the impact of the insult so it doesn't settle in your spirit. It deflects the jealousy, the betrayal, the rejection, because you know who you are in Christ and you know whose you are. The enemy tries to plant seeds of anger, unforgiveness, and revenge, but they cannot grow in a heart that is saturated with love. Love will not allow the soil of your spirit to become fertile ground for evil intentions. It creates boundaries not just for others, but for your own thoughts and actions, keeping you aligned with the will of God even when you are under attack. Love doesn't just guard you from what others do, it guards you from what you could become. Without love, even the most well-meaning person can be twisted by life's pain. Anger can turn into bitterness, bitterness can turn into hatred, and hatred can lead you down paths you never thought you would walk. But when you wear love as your shield, it stops that transformation before it starts. You can feel the sting of the wound without letting it shape your identity. You can acknowledge the hurt without letting it dictate your future. You can be in the middle of chaos and still choose compassion. Because love keeps you anchored to God's truth when everything else is pulling at you to respond in kind. This shield is not passive, it is active. Love is not weak, it is not naive, it is not blind to the evil in the world. On the contrary, love sees evil clearly and still chooses to fight it with goodness. Love is the courage to show mercy when vengeance seems easier. It is the strength to extend grace when judgment would feel justified. It is the discipline to forgive when the wound is still fresh. That is why the enemy fights so hard to break down the shield of love, because if he can get you to lower that shield, he can get access to your soul. When the storms of life come, love holds the pieces of your heart together so the winds of disappointment don't scatter them beyond repair. When people lie on you, walk away from you, or try to tear you down, love whispers, "You are still mine, you are still chosen, you are still worth it." Love becomes your safe place in a world that is constantly unsafe. It teaches you that your value does not come from how others treat you, but from the one who created you. And when you live with that understanding, you stop allowing people's negativity to infiltrate your spirit. You realize that their words, their actions, their rejection cannot define you because your definition has already been set by God's love. To guard your soul with love is to live from a place of abundance, not scarcity. Scarcity says, "If I love you, I will have less for myself." Abundance says, "The more love I give, the more love I have." Scarcity says, "I must protect myself by shutting down." Abundance says, "I am already protected, so I can stay open." Love shifts your perspective from fear-based living to faith-based living. You stop reacting out of insecurity and start responding out of security in God. And that security is what disarms the weapons the enemy tries to use against you. Love as a shield is not a one-time choice, it is a daily decision. Every morning you wake up, you are stepping into a battlefield where lies, offenses, and temptations are waiting to take you down. Without the shield, every hit feels personal, every insult feels fatal, and every loss feels final. But with love in place, you start to see those attacks for what they are, attempts to get you to lower your guard. You realize the enemy's strategy is not just to hurt you, but to turn you into something you were never meant to be. He wants you to become bitter, to become hateful, to become hopeless. But love won't let him have that victory. There will be moments when holding up that shield feels exhausting. There will be times when the attacks keep coming and your arms feel weak. That's when you remember that love is not powered by your strength alone. It is fueled by God's Spirit within you. You are not just holding up love, love is holding you up. It is keeping you from collapsing under the weight of what you're going through. It is giving you the endurance to keep standing when you feel like sitting down, the courage to keep moving when you feel like giving up. And every time you keep that shield up, you frustrate the plans of the enemy because you refuse to let his darkness enter your heart. The more you choose love, the stronger your shield becomes. Every time you forgive, you add another layer to that defense. Every time you choose to speak life instead of death, you reinforce the barrier. Every time you pray for someone who hurt you, you make it harder for the enemy to penetrate your spirit. Love doesn't just protect you from others, it protects the purity of your own heart so you can keep living in alignment with God's purpose. Even in moments when you don't feel like loving, even when your flesh screams for retaliation, the shield of love reminds you of who you are and whose you are. It keeps you from stepping out of character just to win an argument or prove a point. It guards you from becoming a reflection of the very thing you're fighting against. Because the truth is, the greatest victory you can have over darkness is not to defeat it on its own terms, but to refuse to let it change you from the inside out. Love is the shield that allows you to walk through a world full of hate without letting hate walk into you. It allows you to face betrayal without becoming a betrayer, to endure rejection without rejecting yourself, to confront evil without letting evil find a home in your heart. And when you live with that kind of love as your shield, you become untouchable in the spirit, because no weapon formed against you can prosper when your heart is fully covered by the love of God. Absence of love creates a vacuum that evil is eager to fill, because the human heart was never designed to live empty. God made us to be vessels, and vessels are always meant to be filled. If love is not present, something else will take its place, and that something else will not be neutral. An empty heart is like an abandoned house. If it's not occupied by its rightful owner, intruders will move in. When love is gone, fear creeps in. When love is missing, bitterness begins to spread. When love is withheld, resentment takes root and starts to twist the way we see ourselves, the way we see others, and the way we see God. The absence of love does not leave you untouched. It leaves you vulnerable, exposed, and open to things you never intended to allow in. When you take love out of a home, you don't just get silence, you get arguments, hostility, and distance. When you take love out of a community, you don't just get indifference. You get division, envy, and violence. And when you take love out of a soul, you don't just get emptiness, you get despair, hopelessness, and darkness. The devil is opportunistic. He doesn't waste a vacancy. The moment love is gone, He sends in a replacement hatred disguised as self-protection, greed disguised as ambition, cruelty disguised as strength. Evil thrives in places where love has been evicted. Because there is nothing left to guard the door, people often think that if they stop loving, they are simply shutting themselves off from pain. They believe that withholding love will protect them from rejection, betrayal, or disappointment. But what they don't realize is that in trying to avoid hurt, they are opening the door to something far more destructive. A heart that stops loving doesn't stay still. It becomes a breeding ground for suspicion, for cynicism, for selfishness. The walls you build to keep others out can quickly become the prison walls that keep you locked in. And in that isolation, evil whispers louder and louder until it becomes the only voice you hear. This is why the absence of love is so dangerous. It is never just nothing. In the spiritual realm, nothing is neutral. Every space is claimed by something, and if it's not claimed by love, it will be claimed by something else. Think about a field left unattended. If you don't plant seeds, weeds will grow. You don't have to intentionally plant weeds. They come naturally when the ground is neglected. In the same way, you don't have to invite evil in directly. If you leave your heart unguarded by love, it will naturally attract what is destructive. Darkness doesn't wait for permission. It waits for opportunity. When love is missing, our perception of life changes. We start to see people as threats instead of allies, as obstacles instead of partners. We interpret kindness with suspicion, generosity with doubt, and correction with offense. Without love, we stop giving the benefit of the doubt, and we start assuming the worst. That shift in perspective doesn't just affect how we treat others. It changes who we become. Because the more we expect evil from people, the more we begin to mirror the very evil we fear. Love is the filter that keeps our vision clear, and when that filter is gone, the image of the world becomes distorted, and our responses become corrupted. The absence of love is also where wounds become permanent. Love is the healing balm that closes the cuts of life. Without it, the hurt just sits there, exposed to infection. Unhealed wounds turn into lifelong grudges, unresolved pain becomes generational patterns, and offenses become identities. A child who grows up without love often becomes an adult who struggles to give it. That vacuum gets carried forward, passed down, and multiplied until entire families, communities, or even nations are marked by cycles of distrust and hostility. Evil doesn't just fill the vacuum for a moment. It settles in, decorates the place, and plans to stay. You can see this truth in everyday life. When a marriage loses love, it quickly gains resentment. When friendships lose love, they gain competition. When workplaces lose love, they gain backstabbing and division. Evil doesn't always show up with horns and a pitchfork. It can show up as gossip, cold shoulders, power struggles, and silent grudges. It can show up as greed in leadership, cruelty in relationships, or dishonesty in business. These things flourish where love has been absent because there is nothing left to check them, challenge them, or cast them out. Even in your personal life, the absence of love can cause you to sabotage yourself. You start making choices from a place of emptiness instead of fullness. You chase approval instead of purpose. You measure your worth by accomplishments, possessions, or relationships instead of by God's truth. That vacuum pulls you toward things that promise to fill you, but ultimately drain you even more. Without love as your anchor, you drift toward addictions, toward toxic connections, toward self-destructive behaviors because you're searching for something to take the place of what's missing. And every time you try to fill that space with something other than love, It leaves you emptier than before. One of the most dangerous things about the absence of love is how quickly it normalizes itself. At first, you feel the difference, you notice the coldness, the distance, the tension, but over time, the absence becomes the norm. You start to think, this is just how life is, or this is just who I am now. You forget what it's like to live with an open heart. And once that numbness sets in, you stop fighting to restore love, and evil gets a permanent residence. What was once a temporary vacancy becomes a long-term lease, and before you realize it, you have built a life where love feels foreign and distrust feels natural. The truth is, love is not just a luxury, it is a necessity for survival, for sanity, for spiritual stability. Without it, we are defenseless. That vacuum is like a sign that says, open for occupation. And evil doesn't hesitate to answer. It knows exactly what to bring: division to break unity, deception to break trust, selfishness to break generosity, cruelty to break compassion. It moves into the spaces where love should have been working, and it starts rebuilding the atmosphere to match its own agenda. If love is like fresh air, evil is like smoke. It chokes, blinds, and suffocates until you can't even remember what it felt like to breathe freely. This is why guarding love in your heart is not optional. It's why you can't just let it fade when people disappoint you or life gets hard. Because the moment love steps out, something else steps in. You might not notice it right away, but slowly the fruit will show. Your thoughts will get darker, your patience will get shorter, your hope will get weaker. And before long, you'll find yourself becoming someone you don't even recognize, all because the vacuum was filled with something other than love. Only God's love can permanently evict what hate has built, because human strength alone cannot tear down the walls that bitterness, anger, and unforgiveness have erected over years. Hate is a builder. It lays brick after brick, fueled by wounds, fueled by grudges, fueled by lies whispered into the heart. It constructs strongholds that feel impossible to dismantle. We can try to ignore them, we can try to work around them, or even decorate them with temporary fixes like distraction, success, or surface-level happiness, but those walls remain. Time alone doesn't remove them. Good intentions alone don't remove them. Even self-discipline alone doesn't remove them. It takes something stronger, purer, and more relentless than hate to tear it all down. And that something is the love of God. God's love is not just an emotion, it is a force. It is the very power that spoke the universe into being, the same love that reached into chaos and brought order, that reached into darkness and created light. When that love enters a heart, it doesn't negotiate with hate, it drives it out. Hate thrives in places where it can hide, where it can feed on pain and isolation. But God's love exposes it, shining light into every shadow, leaving no place for it to stay. Hate can mask itself as self-protection, as justified anger, as just the way I am. But the love of God strips away those disguises and reveals the poison for what it truly is. And once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. You cannot continue to coexist with it. The love of God will not allow you to. The reason God's love is the only force that can permanently evict hate is because it addresses the root, not just the surface. Hate is not always born in moments of rage. It is often born in moments of deep hurt. That hurt becomes a wound, and when left untreated, it festers into something toxic. We can try to change our behavior, try to speak more kindly, try to be the bigger person, but if the wound is still there, the infection will spread again. God's love doesn't just put a bandage over the wound. It goes deep, cleansing the infection, healing the tissue, restoring what was damaged. And when the wound is healed, hate has nothing left to feed on. Some people fear letting go of hate because they think it's the only thing holding them together. They've carried it for so long that it feels like part of their identity. It feels like the thing that keeps them strong, that keeps them from being hurt again. But hate is a liar. It promises protection, but it actually makes you weaker, because it consumes your energy, your joy, and your peace. God's love offers a different kind of strength, the kind that frees you from the need to constantly defend yourself. The kind that allows you to walk into any room, face any person, live in any situation without being controlled by what they did or said. That freedom is not found in holding on to hate. It's found in letting God's love push it out. Hate often builds its home in the heart by making us replay old offenses, relive old conversations, and rehearse all the ways we've been wronged. It builds resentment like furniture in a house, arranging it until it feels comfortable, until it feels normal. But God's love comes in and starts moving everything around. It removes the bitterness from the living room, replaces the resentment in the kitchen with gratitude, clears the unforgiveness out of the bedroom, and replaces it with peace. It changes the entire atmosphere of your heart until the environment that hate once thrived in no longer exists. Hate cannot stay where the air is saturated with love. The eviction that God's love brings is not temporary because it doesn't just deal with the hate itself. It changes the locks on the doors of your heart. It doesn't just drive hate out. It prevents it from coming back. The Bible says that perfect love casts out fear, and fear is often the foundation that hate is built on. When you remove fear, fear of being hurt, fear of being overlooked, fear of being powerless, you remove one of hate's main entry points. God's love fills those empty places with security, identity, and purpose. And once you are secure in His love, the enemy cannot use the same old lies to sneak hate back, and sometimes we think we can remove hate by simply deciding to be more loving toward people. But if we try to do that without first receiving God's love for ourselves, it will be exhausting and unsustainable. You cannot pour out what you have not received. You cannot give away what you don't believe you deserve. When you let God's love fill you completely, loving others becomes a natural overflow, and in that overflow, hate loses its power. Not because you are forcing yourself to be kind, but because kindness has become who you are. The transformation is from the inside out, and that is why it lasts when God's love evicts hate. It doesn't just change your emotions, it changes your memory. You may still remember what happened, but you will no longer feel bound by it. You will remember the pain, but it will no longer control your choices. You will remember the betrayal, but it will no longer dictate your relationships. That's because God's love doesn't erase your past. It redeems it. It turns wounds into testimonies, scars into stories of victory. It transforms the very thing hate tried to use to destroy you into a weapon you can use against the kingdom of darkness. Now, instead of your story fueling bitterness, it fuels hope for others who are still trapped in it. God's love also teaches you how to maintain the eviction. The enemy will try to revisit, try to remind you of old hurts, try to get you to reopen the door. But when you are anchored in love, you recognize his tactics for what they are. You learn to stop rehearsing pain and start rehearsing promises. You learn to stop dwelling on offense and start dwelling in the presence of God. And as long as you remain in that place, hate cannot move back in, because the space is already taken. Your heart is fully occupied by the one who paid the price to claim it. This is why nothing else works as a permanent solution. Counseling can help identify the problem, time can dull the pain, success can distract from it for a while. But only God's love transforms the core of who you are so completely that hate has no place to land. It doesn't just take out the trash, it remodels the entire house. It doesn't just push out the darkness, it installs light that never goes out. That is why once His love has truly filled a heart, the eviction of hate is final because the landlord himself has taken residence.